today is we're going to go on from our channel setting that we did last week. So I know a couple of you were missing. Hopefully you've had a chance to go on the hub and sort of catch up, but if not, it's not too, you haven't missed majorly too much. It's just basically the difference we're going to do today from your channel setting is your formation of where your rollers go. Like last week we did in channel, so it was lots of rows. This morning we're going to be doing a brickwork. You can see I've already completed the head, so you can see the whole of the head, because I'm aware in my demo I'm not going to obviously set the whole head, so I want you to be able to see a finished wind. Okay. So difference with a brick compared to your channels. Obviously last week your channels were obviously in lots of rows, and I don't know if anyone got to the stage where they dressed out, but you will have found when you took your rollers out you will have had lots of parting marks that were very hard to get rid of. I'm not talking about roller marks, but obviously parting marks where the channels were, so in between the rows you would have had a definite parting that's very difficult to then dress out. So this is the reason why we would use a brick over a channel set, so that you do reduce that amount of partings that you get. It's much easier to obviously dress out. Okay, so that's the formation of how we put our rollers in, if you like. So this is actually a brickwork set. So just to remind you from last week, I'll show you, just talk a little bit about how we put our rollers in. I'll just move this head back to move my other one in. And as like last week, what I'm going to do, I'm going to use my Velcro rollers.
Can we use Velcro rollers?
You can today, yeah. I think some of you, as I say, keep open-minded, because some of you will find it more of a hindrance than a help.
Right, yeah. We'll give it a go. Yeah,
but if you do use the Velcros, do use it on wet hair rather than dry hair, so that you can obviously dry it, and then you'll be able to dress it out as well, because obviously if you use it on dry hair, you'll notice it won't give as much curling.
The other ones, they hurt my thumbs.
They slip my
thumbs.
thumbs.
I slip on my thumbs.
They do, yeah. That is the benefit to a Velcro over obviously a roller with pins. In your criteria for what you need to be assessed for, I don't believe you're assessed on Velcros, so that's why I do like to get you to use the other type of rollers, because you definitely have to use those. So obviously if you always practice with Velcros, when it comes to your assessment you're then going to struggle to put the other rollers in. So my suggestion would be either have a go at both at some point, or maybe do half of your head with Velcros and carry on with some of your other ones. But yeah. So obviously, as you can see, our first initial roller is going to go right in at the front. So it's very similar to your first roller that you put in your channel last week. You would have obviously taken that first section. And you can see what I'm doing there is the same as last week. I'm going to go for the width of my roller. Okay. So no wider than your roller. What's going to happen if your section of hair is wider than your roller? Can you remember from last week? Yeah. So it's going to come off the end. So it needs to comfortably sit in the middle of that barrel of that roller. Okay. If it's any wider, it's going to be hanging off. So you're going to get lots of baggy ends. And obviously, similar situation coming into the depth of your section as well. If it's any wider, or as in the width of your roller, as in that way rather than that way, obviously you're going to have the same thing. You're going to have root drag, and you're going to obviously disrupt. Your hair's not going to sit on its section. Okay, so we're going to go for the same again, and I've got the same head, which is silly, isn't it? Look at that. So right, let's get this first one in. So we're going to put that first one in right in the roller. Remembering, I don't know how many of you last week had trouble with your fish ends. They were quite good actually. There was one or two of you that had some. So you must make sure that you get all your ends tucked in. If you have a section like that where it just drops, just let it drop. Wind the roller down, sorry, and then you can just pick that hair up again.
Fish ends mean short.
Fish hooks is what we call when your ends get buckled. So if you remember last week when you were dressing your sets out, your ends, it's when you don't get your ends cleanly around the roller. Basically, they get buckled, and the end will be like it goes like a frizzy hook. We call it a fish hook because that's what it sort of goes. It bends back on itself, and you get it's very hard to dress that out smooth then. Okay, so you've got your first roller in there. So bearing in mind it's going to be, we call it brickwork set simply because it's supposed to look like a brick. So if you can imagine how your bricks are formatted on your wall, you have one, obviously your first brick at the top. Underneath that brick you then have two either side of the first one. So you can imagine if you all look at the back wall there where we've got bricks quite handily, you're going to see that what your aim is to not have a parting running down the channel. So your aim is to try and avoid that where you can. Now we'll just say before we go on, a lot of people struggle with this because they get hung up on that and think, right, they have to. There won't be always a time when they directly fit like that. So you'll notice from mine sometimes, like here, they will nearly run parallel, which is fine as long as they're not all like that. Okay, so don't get too hung up on that they have to be separated like that. You can see this is what you're aiming for, is basically so you've not got a long line, but you're aiming for them to be sort of staggered like this, okay? So our second roller goes in behind the first roller. Okay. And again, we'll just talk quickly about your tension, remembering that your tension must be even throughout your section. If you're balancing over one way or taking it over, that's what when you'll find your ends will go baggy on one side and your roller won't sit straight, it will sit uneven. So I know a few of you came across that last week. That is how you obviously avoid that. You can see I'm using my thumbs to hold that section of hair down, and I'm also using my tail comb to tuck those ends in to try and avoid those fish hooks, okay? I'm going to pop that in there so you can see. So then that one goes in behind. And we're going to do the same again on the other side. Again, bear in mind the width of your section. Okay. Again, I'm making sure my tension is even. I'm combing right from the root to make sure that's nice and smooth. Obviously on wet hair, as I say, it's actually harder on dry hair, so I'd like you all to obviously make sure that you've shampooed the hair first or sprayed it down, however you on your tuition heads. I'm using my thumb. You can see I've got a little bit that's going to poke up, so I'm going to use my tail comb just to make sure that's smoothly in there. And then we fold it back on itself. So you can see if your sectioning really is the key. If your sections that you take for each roller are nice and straight and no bigger than your roller, they will sit nicely on that base, okay? This is called on-base setting. We talked about this briefly last week, and basically what that means is when the roller sits on the section that you've taken. We've also got something called off-base, which we will use and you do have to be assessed for. And basically when you do off-base, you're not looking for root lift. So obviously with this type of set, your main aim is to get root lift, so lifting at the root there and potentially some curl, okay? So if you're trying to avoid that, you would then set off base, which means you drag the root so you don't get you'd use that maybe on longer hair when you want it to be quite smooth on the top and a bit of a curl on the end. You would, off base is how you're going to get that, okay? But today we're going to do on base, obviously. You can see, so I'm just tucking those ends. You may find obviously on your head you're going to have ends that aren't all even, so this is quite good to show you how you combat that really. So you can see I'm just using my tail comb just to tuck my ends in, and I'm using my thumbs to hold the section against the roller as I wind that down.
Would you always do setting of the hair wet?
You've got wet setting and dry setting. Generally if you're wet setting, obviously it's shampooed first, and you then obviously dry under a dryer. You can use dry setting and you can use Velcros, or you can use heated rollers. So it's a similar thing, but obviously you do it on dry hair. With the heated rollers, they're a similar process, sort of similar kind of way to do the wet setting in terms of it goes under a heat. Yeah. So obviously the heated rollers are hot to start, they cool down, so it gives you that same, still using heat. With these, obviously, when you do a dry set, you would still put it under a dryer for sort of, obviously about 10 minutes just to create some sort of heat. You have to heat it up to get the set to set, if you like.
So in dry hair, would it just not be as curly?
Yeah, if you did just dry hair and didn't put it under any heat, and it would probably just give you a bit of root lift. It wouldn't necessarily give you a curl. It would probably just lift the hair off the scalp, and obviously just give you some volume. So it's used. A lot of people use this type of technique. So dry setting with Velcro rollers, If they're just looking for volume on the crown or certain areas, if someone's got an area that goes flat quite easily, that would be a good time to use that too. Okay, so we're going to show you that. So what I'm just going to show you here is this is where everyone seems to come unstuck. You can see they get the first few rollers in. So when you get to here, so you've got your one in the front, let me just take that off there so I can show you a bit. You've got your first roller in the front and then 2 behind it, and then I've got 3 running behind that. So you can see I've almost got a little triangle going on there, if you imagine on the base. Okay, so when you look at my one I've already wound, what you do is when you get to there, you're going to be, obviously if you carry on that arc round there, so you carry on going like that, eventually what's going to happen is you would end up with just a section very narrow in the back that you can't fit any rollers in. So what you're going to do once you get to about the 3rd row, you're going to carry on working from that middle. So you always work from the middle and then round. And then what you'll find is as you come in onto that curve, because remember in the head's curved, it's not straight like a brick wall, so hence why your rollers don't sit like bricks do on a wall, and you won't always get them evenly spaced. You're going to follow that curve, and then on the side sections, you're going to meet those as you come round, sort of part way round the head. So what you'll do is, if you can imagine, if you carried on that way, if you know what I'm saying, you put one there and one there, and then behind that you followed that, eventually you would end up with no space in the back. So what we do is we start in the middle, we always work from the middle, and you meet your ends, your sides, sorry, as you come down the head. Okay? So you can see what I mean there. Does everyone understand what I mean? Yeah. That makes sense, does it? I'm not talking gibberish this morning. So obviously we're going to come round and you're going to meet it eventually on some of those middle sections, okay?
So once you finish that bit, you then
yeah, so you're going to go, yeah, so we're going to go from exactly right, yeah. So rather than obviously coming here and putting one here,
we go from the middle
yeah,
and work your way.
Yeah, when in actual fact you probably might put one there, but on that next thing, can you see what I mean? We'll put one in this side to show you what I mean. So you may put one there. So just remembering
how it's going to end up.
With a brick.
Then from the 3rd row, it's not going to end up like the brick.
Yeah, it does, yeah.
Oh, it does.
Because what happens is you'll have, like, say, 2 rollers in here.
Oh, right, okay.
You'll have your rollers in there, and then on your next row you come round more like that.
Oh, right, okay.
Okay, so you're going to be, so almost you're doing that, and then you're doing that. So you're obviously working in a horseshoe.
Right, okay, yeah,
but you can if you carried on following that formation, what would happen is these rollers would all come down here.
Yeah, well, that's what I thought.
And then you'd be left in the back with just a little small section about that wide that all you can do is put a channel in, which is what you're trying to avoid. Okay, so don't get too hung up on make them look like bricks. What your aim with a brickwork set is to avoid channels. Okay, and like I say, there will be parts on the head that sometimes the rollers will have to sit parallel. They will have to sit one behind the other. That's okay in a couple of areas. What you don't want is that all over the head. Okay. Yeah. So like I say, then once you get to that row, you carry on from the middle. So you always work from the middle and work round. All right. And obviously I'll help you as you go through today with that, because you'll see when you get there, you'll see what I mean. Some of you will carry on, and you'll get to the point where you've put these in too far down, and then you're going to hinder how you're going to your formation at the back. Okay, so we're going to pop some more in. So what I'm going to do, I'm not going to finish this head, because I think the most important bit is how you start. So obviously remembering that your first one in the very front and then 2 behind, and then you're going to follow that from there. Okay, I'm going to stop there because you have seen the final wind, so you can see how your formation should look. It's not going to look perfectly like that. Obviously what you'll find, how your rollers fit on that head is very much like a jigsaw puzzle. They're just going to fit in. Sometimes you have to make a roller fit in a space that's perhaps smaller than it should be. That's fine. You might have one like this section where you've got a very small amount of hair, but obviously, and that roller is going to sit on some of the face. That's fine. Okay, so that don't get too hung up on it's got to fit that roller. You will have to adapt that slightly, and obviously depending on the size of the head. Obviously these heads are obviously all the same size, but the amount of hair that's woven into them is sometimes different. Sometimes you get a head that's got lots of hair on. Sometimes you get a head like this where you can nearly see through the hair because there's so little left on it. Okay, so that will definitely determine how many rollers you put in, how much hair you get around each specific roller. Okay, and obviously when you're working on real heads, as in when you've done it on tuition heads and you're working on a real life client, obviously the amount of hair they have on a head and the size of their head is going to differ greatly, which will differ your wind. Okay, so obviously you have to adapt each wind to the person you're working on. Okay.
Would you not use a smaller curler on the side?
You can use a smaller curler, but